In the criminal justice system, the people are represented by two separate yet equally important groups: the police who investigate crime and the district attorneys who prosecute the offenders. These are their stories.
Officer Roberson, what was the incident, what happened, and what do you know?
On the night of December 31st, I was on patrol around 11:45 p.m. when I witnessed a black pickup truck driving erratically. First, it was drifting out of its lane and into the neighboring lane, and then it jerked back quickly on its own lane. Next, it cruised up to the stop sign without stopping until it was well past the sign covering the crosswalk. At that point, I decided to make a traffic stop. On the night of December 31st, I was on patrol around 11:45 p.m. when I witnessed a black pickup truck driving erratically. First, it was drifting out of its lane and into the neighboring lane, and then it jerked back quickly into its own lane. Next, it cruised up to a stop sign without stopping until it was well past the sign, covering the crosswalk. At that point, I decided to make a traffic stop. Even though it was dark outside, I was able to see with my flashlight as I approached. I saw the driver toss what appeared to be 2 cans into the back seat. The truck had a second row bench seat as I neared the rear window. I noticed at least 2 open beer cans in the back seat that appeared to be empty. The driver was identified as Charlie Mather, and he said he was heading home from a friend's house. When I asked about the beer cans, the defendant said, "This is my dad's truck. I just borrowed it sometimes. I don't know anything about the beer cans."
Okay. State your name, what happened, and what do you know?
My name's Dani Garwin. I attend high school with Charlie. We're not really friends. We cross paths here and there. We applied for the same pizza job, but he got it as usual. He usually gets what he wants sometimes, but that's how it goes.
On December 29th, Andy Coroner invited a group of guys and girls over to hang out and play poker. We didn't gamble for money, though we just played for fun. Andy's dad has a weekly poker night where he and his friends actually gamble money, but we didn't. There were leftover snacks and beer from the adults' poker game the night before, so we ate and drank some beer while we played cards. Charlie had a beer like the rest of us and sipped on it all night. I personally saw him drinking it while we were sitting at the poker table together. He was sitting right next to me. I'm not saying anybody was drunk this time around, not even close. It wasn't really that kind of party. At one point, I even teased Charlie about being a lightweight for only having 1 beer, but it wasn't like some kind of peer pressure situation. I was just giving him a hard time because of he was winning and he was being kind of a jerk about it. Around 10:30 p.m., Charlie mentioned curfew at 11 and we wrapped up the poker game. Andy was circulating and taking pictures, so we stopped long enough to get a little group shot. I was pretty tired, so I figured I'd head home too. As Charlie left, I stood in the doorway saying goodbye to Andy and talking about plans for next weekend. We watched him get in the truck and leave as we talked. It looked to me like he had something in his hand as he climbed into the truck, but I can't be sure what it was. In my opinion, Charlie got what he deserved. Even if he only had 1 beer at the party, he shouldn't have driven afterwards.
My name is Charlie Mather and I'm 17 years old. I attend Sedisa High School where I'm on the honor roll and play on the varsity soccer team. I have worked part-time at Paul's Pizza for the last year. Over the winter break from school, some kids would often get together in the evenings after work and hang out. On December 31st, Andy invited some guys and girls over to play poker. My dad plays poker with Andy's dad once a week, and they had just had their weekly poker night at Andy's house the night before. So we decided to do a junior varsity poker night, where we wouldn't gamble like the adults, but instead we would all just try our hand at poker with the chips and hang out. I borrowed my dad's truck and went over to Andy's around 7. My dad's truck isn't usually very clean, so I didn't even notice the empty cans and the cup holders. He probably had a few beers at Andy's while he was playing poker the night before, or maybe on his last fishing trip. It isn't unusual for him to have a couple of beers, but I've never seen him drink while driving. He has always told me not to drink and drive. We were playing poker and having snacks while Andy brought out a 6-pack of beer and handed one to each of us. I don't drink. I wasn't sure what to say, so I just didn't say anything. I took the beer, opened it, and I set it down on the coaster and left it there. Dani made a wisecrack about whether I was going to drink any beer, so I put the can to my lips a couple of times and pretended to drink a little. I didn't actually drink any of it. I don't know why I didn't just say no or no thanks. I guess I didn't want to look lame. When I got pulled over, the flashing lights lit up the interior cabin of the truck and I saw the beer cans. I panicked and tossed them in the back seat, afraid the cop would think I'd been drinking. I was so nervous because I had never been pulled over before and I didn't handle it very well. When I had to explain the beer cans and got out of the car for the sobriety test, my heart was pounding, and even though I felt like I was going to pass out. I was so stressed. Everything the officer made me do required good balance, which I've never had. I'm so clumsy, I didn't stand a chance. After this nightmare, paying lawyer fees, fines, and everything else, I don't know if college is even an option. Plus my scholarships that I have gotten if I'm going to get charged with this DUI.
My name is Andy Cormer, and I'm 17 years old. I go to school with Charlie Mather and Dani Garwin, and I work part-time at Polly's Pizza with Charlie. Charlie and I worked the lunch shift, and it was an ordinary shift. When we were walking to our cars as we left, I suggested that our group of friends come over to my place for a junior varsity version of my dad's poker night. He had leftover food and beer, and I knew it would be fun, so Charlie agreed and left in his dad's truck. Later that evening, everyone arrived and we set up the poker table and got out the snacks. After we played a couple of hands, I went to get the beer from the fridge and started passing them out. As I passed them out, Charlie seemed hesitant. Everyone was having a good time. Charlie and I had several winning hands of poker. Dani seemed annoyed, and I recall Dani making a comment to Charlie about his beer, but I didn't hear what it was. Charlie looked a little frustrated and mentioned curfew and the drive home. I sat at the table playing poker with them almost the whole night, and not once do I recall Charlie actually taking a drink of that beer. It sat there on the table and he held it, but I don't remember seeing him drink it. Charlie's curfew was at 11 p.m., and he was one of the first to leave. As Charlie left, Dani and I were standing in the doorway talking. I didn't see Charlie stumble or slur his words or do anything that would make me think he was impaired. I'm confident that not only was he not impaired, but he didn't even have a sip of alcohol. If I thought for a second that he had, I wouldn't have let him drive home. We look out for each other.
All rise. The Court of the 2nd Judicial Circuit Criminal Division is now in session. The Honorable Addisyn presiding.
You may all be seated. Members of the jury, your duty today will be to determine whether the defendant is guilty or not guilty based only on facts and evidence provided in this case. The prosecution must prove that a crime was committed and that the defendant is the person who committed the crime. However, if you're not satisfied of the defendant's guilt to the extent, then reasonable doubt exists and the defendant must be found guilty. Miss Andrea, what is today's case?
Today's case is Sandista Court against Charlie Mathers in the matter of a DUI conviction or not.
Miss Andrea, please swear in the jury.
Please raise your right hand. Do you swear that the testimony you are about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Is the prosecution ready?
Yes.
Is the defense ready?
Yes.
Your Honor, opposing counsel, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the state will prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant, Charlie Mather, a minor, did knowingly consume alcohol at a party on the night of December 31st, but the defendant didn't just consume alcohol that night. Charlie also made the decision to get behind the wheel of a truck to drive the streets of Sandista County, the same streets that you and I drive, the same streets where construction workers may be working on the side of the road or where a child may be crossing the street at a crosswalk to get home. You will hear from the defendant's friend, Dani Garwin, who will testify that the defendant was drinking beer at a party just before getting behind the wheel to drive. The state will show you photographic evidence of the defendant with the beer in hand. You will also hear from Officer Roberson, who was on duty that night and observed Charlie Mather swerving into the next lane and coasting past the stop sign, nearly into the intersection. Officer Roberson will testify that not only was Charlie driving erratically, but he had 2 beer cans from the party, which he tossed in the back of the truck as soon as he was pulled over. Charlie did this in hopes of hiding evidence of his night of drinking. However, it was evident to Officer Roberson that Charlie had been drinking, so he conducted a sobriety test, which Charlie failed. It is lucky that the defendant did not hurt someone. The state will prove that these things beyond a reasonable doubt, and we will ask you to render that only just a verdict in this case. that the defendant is guilty of driving under the influence by a minor.
Your Honor, opposing counsel, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, Charlie Mather did not consume any alcohol on the night of December 31st. Like a lot of high school kids, Charlie went to play cards and hang out at a friend's house. Charlie drove his dad's truck and promised to be home before 12 a.m. Charlie's a responsible kid and a great student. But like a lot of kids, Charlie was put in an awkward situation when a friend passed out beer and Charlie didn't quite know how to say no. So rather than make a scene, Charlie just took it and figured nobody would really notice that he didn't drink it. Charlie played it cool, but didn't ever take a drink, and then just before leaving that night, he poured it down the sink when nobody was looking. On the drive home, the radio station needed to be adjusted, which caused the car to swerve slightly. In fact, Officer Roberson apparently did not feel the need to conduct a more accurate test of Charlie's blood alcohol level by administering a breathalyzer or blood test. Both would have proven that Charlie consumed no alcohol on the night in question. Instead, Officer Roberson relied on the less conclusive standardized field sobriety tests, a test Charlie failed during the traffic stop because of fear. Charlie was shaking so uncontrollably that it was impossible to keep balance or focus on the task at hand. In addition to this information, you will also hear a testimony from Andy Cormer, who was there that night at the gathering of friends with Charlie. Andy's testimony will corroborate the story that Charlie held onto the beer can for part of the night, but not once did Andy see Charlie take a single drink, because Charlie did not drink. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the prosecution has the burden of proof in this case. When all the testimony has concluded, we believe you will agree that Charlie Mather is not guilty of these charges. Thank you.
Prosecution, you may call your first witness.
The prosecution would like to call Officer Roberson to the stand.
Bad boys, what you gonna do? What you gonna do when they come for you?
Officer Roberson, can you please state your name and your role with the Sandista County Police Department?
I'm Officer Roberson. I worked for the Sandista County Police Department for 22 years.
On December 31st at approximately 11:45 p.m., you were conducting routine patrol in Sandista County, correct?
Correct.
While on patrol, did you observe a black pickup truck driving in a manner that concerned you?
Yes.
Can you describe the driving behavior that led you to believe a traffic stop was necessary?
They were driving erratically. They didn't stop at the stoplight. They just rolled through it.
When you initiated the traffic stop, did you observe anything unusual about the driver's behavior as you approached the vehicle?
He was moving around a bunch.
Upon approaching the vehicle, what did you observe the driver, Charlie Mather, do?
He threw 2 what looked like beer cans to the back of the seat.
Can you confirm that you saw Charlie throw 2 empty beer cans into the back seat of the truck?
Yes.
How did Charlie perform on the first portion of the sobriety test, which involved walking in a straight line and turning?
He did decent. When he was walking, you're supposed to put one heel in front of the other. While he was doing that, he did put his hands up a couple of times.
At any point during these tests, did you observe Charlie stumble, drop his leg, or raise his arm for the balance?
Yes.
Based on your observation of the sobriety test, did you form an opinion on whether he was impaired?
Yes.
Can you explain why you chose not to conduct a breath or blood test even though you suspected impairment?
While I was doing the test, Charlie smirked.
Objection.
Objection dismissed.
Did you take any other actions during the stop?
I made him call his parents, and then I issued the DUI.
At the time of the stop, did Charlie show any signs of being intoxicated, such as slurred speech or difficulty understanding your instructions?
Yes.
Thank you, Officer Roberson. Nothing further, Your Honor.
The defense may cross-examine the witness.
You stated that the truck was driving erratically. Can you describe specifically how long this behavior lasted and how it compared to other potential causes, such as fatigue or distracted driving?
It lasted around a minute or 2. I could clearly see that he wasn't tired. He just had some drinks. I could see it by his eyes. His eyes were red.
You conducted only 2 parts of the standard field sobriety test and decided not to administer the horizontal gaze test or a breathalyzer or a blood alcohol test. Is it standard practice in your department to forego these tests when investigating DUIs?
I had enough probable cause to forego any more tests using my discretion.
You mentioned that a blood alcohol test would not have mattered. Is it not true that such tests could conclusively confirm or deny that there was presence of alcohol in Charlie's system?
That's true.
Yes or no, were the beers the same that my client tossed over his shoulder as the ones he was allegedly drinking on the night of December 31st at 11:30 p.m.?
Judge, objection, speculation.
Objection dismissed. Defense, please continue.
I'm not sure.
Did you notice any odor of alcohol on Charlie's breath?
No.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Prosecution, you may call your second witness.
We would like to call Dani Garland to the stand. Miss Garwin, can you testify that you saw Charlie take a few sips of beer that night? Is that correct?
Yes.
However, you also stated that Charlie was not intoxicated and that you were not worried about him driving, correct?
Correct.
How many sips of beer would you estimate Charlie had that evening?
Only just a couple.
Would you agree that even small amounts of alcohol can impair a person's ability to drive safely?
Yes, just a bit.
Were you aware that Charlie's performance on the sobriety test was described as poor by Officer
I
Roberson?
wasn't aware.
Do you believe that Charlie could have been impaired by alcohol, even if he did not appear intoxicated to you at the time?
Yes.
Would you agree that even if Charlie wasn't heavily intoxicated, he could still have been in violation of the law by consuming alcohol and driving?
Yes.
Did you see how Charlie was driving after he left the house?
No.
So therefore, you cannot testify to whether Charlie was impaired or not when he was behind the wheel.
Incorrect.
Thank you. Nothing further, Your Honor.
The defense may cross-examine the witness.
You stated Charlie always had a way of getting what he wanted. Would you agree that this might make you biased against him?
No.
In your witness statement, you stated that Charlie got what he deserved once he got that DUI. Do you still feel that way?
I feel it was only fair. He knew he was drinking and he was driving, and it just shows you shouldn't be doing that either way. So,
How closely were you watching Charlie the entire night to be certain he was sipping on this beer all night?
watching, he was here and there. We were around each other for a good amount of the night, so I saw pretty much enough.
Did you see Charlie finish his beer or consume more than one beer that night?
No, it looked like he had the same beer can the whole night since I've been seeing him the whole night too, so.
You stated that this wasn't that kind of party and no one was drunk. Would you agree that it's possible Charlie wasn't impaired even if he did sip from that beer?
Yes, possibly.
You mentioned Charlie was winning at poker and being kind of a jerk about it. Could this have influenced how you felt about him that night?
No, it's just a game, so.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Defense, you may call your first witness.
The defense would like to call up Charlie Mathers. Charlie, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, including your age, your school, and any extracurricular activities you may be involved in?
I'm 17 years old. I go to Sedinsa High School, and I play varsity soccer.
Can you describe what happened when a six-pack of beer was brought out at this poker night?
It caught me by surprise. I remember one of them handing it to me, and I just placed it on the counter, and that's where it stayed the whole night.
Why did you toss the beer cans into the back seat when the officer approached?
I didn't want them to think they were mine. They were my dad's, so I just put them back, not thinking much of it.
What did you tell the officer about the beer cans during the stop?
I tried to explain that this is my dad's truck, and so they were just his.
Do you typically have good balance, and how do you think your nervousness affected your performance when it came to these standardized field sobriety tests?
I do not have good balance. I usually don't, just normally, so nervous, and in front of the police officer, I was extra off coordinated.
Do you believe you were impaired in any way while driving home that evening?
I do not.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Prosecution, you may begin your cross-examination.
Charlie, you mentioned that you were in a rush to get home because of curfew. Does that mean you were driving faster than usual?
Yes.
Charlie, given that you were in a rush, would you agree that your focus should have been entirely on driving safely rather than handling the beer cans in your truck?
I was at a complete stop when I was handling the beer can.
Charlie, you claim that you didn't drink any alcohol that night. Can you explain why the officer observed you tossing 2 empty beer cans into the backseat of your truck when he approached your vehicle?
I didn't want them to assume that they were mine.
So isn't it possible that the officer, seeing the beer cans and your erratic driving, could have reasonably suspected that you might have been impaired even if you didn't feel intoxicated?
Objection, leading question.
I'll ask a different question. Charlie, you said that the beer cans belonged to your father. Did you ever mention to the officer that your father had been drinking those beers, or were you only explaining that the cans were his from a fishing trip?
I did explain that the beer cans were from the fishing trip.
So when Officer Robinson conducted a standardized field sobriety test, you had difficulty completing the task, including stumbling and raising your arms for balance, correct?
Yes.
Isn't it true that the inability to perform these tests properly could be an indication of alcohol impairment or at least a lack of coordination?
Lack of coordination. I've never had good balance.
Even if you didn't feel drunk, could your performance on the test have been influenced by alcohol or any other substance?
No.
Do you know that the Texas law prohibits anyone under the age of 21 from driving after consuming alcohol, even in small amounts?
Yes.
So whether you felt impaired or not, you understand that consuming any alcohol and then driving is against the law for someone your age, correct?
I do, correct.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
Defense, you may call up your first witness.
The defense would like to call Andy Comer to the stand. Andy, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, including your age, and how you know my client, Charlie Mather?
Yes, my name is Andy. I'm 17 years old. I know Charlie because we go to school together, and we also work part-time together at Polly's Pizza.
Who provided the beer that night, and how was it distributed among the group?
I guess technically I did provide them. They were in the fridge that were left over from my dad's previous poker nights that he hosted in the same place that we were at.
What was Charlie's reaction when you handed him the beer?
He seemed really hesitant, as if he really didn't want to accept it.
Did you observe Charlie drinking the beer you gave him?
I did not. The only thing I saw was him holding the beer.
Well, where was Charlie's beer for most of the evening, and did it appear to have been consumed by the time he left?
I didn't see him take a single sip of the alcohol. As for the beer can, it was either just sitting on the table or he was just holding it the whole time.
Did you notice any signs that Charlie was impaired, such as stumbling, slurred speech, or unusual behavior?
I didn't see any of that, and if I did, I wouldn't have felt comfortable letting him leave my house and driving.
That kind of brings me to my next question. If Charlie was intoxicated, as the prosecution so claims, would you have let him go home knowing he was intoxicated and risk driving around?
I would not have let him leave my house because I, at the end of the day, was the one that had the beers and passed them out. And I was watching him. He didn't seem to be stumbling, slurring his words, or anything like that. And I probably would have made him spend the night.
No further questions, Your Honor.
The defense may cross-examine the witness.
Andy, you testified that the Snapchat photos you shared were taken on the same night as the incident. Isn't it true that at least in one of those photos, Charlie can be seen holding a beer can? Wouldn't this suggest that Charlie had been consuming that night, even if it was only a few sips?
I'm unsure because we're not clear if those beer cans were the same ones that I had at my get-together.
Andy, earlier you stated that Charlie wasn't impaired, but as someone who had been socializing and drinking with Charlie, do you feel you were even in the position to accurately assess his sobriety, especially considering your own alcohol consumption that night?
I believe I am able to state that he was not impaired because I know my limit, so I wasn't drunk that night.
But you mentioned that Charlie wasn't impaired. How much alcohol had you consumed that night and could have affected your judgment about whether Charlie was fit to drive?
I did have about a beer and a half.
So, in your experience, can someone appear sober but still have alcohol in their system that could impair their ability to drive safely?
That is possible.
Did you ever ask Charlie how much alcohol he had consumed that night, or were you simply assuming based on your observations?
I guess you could say I was assuming, but I was next to him the entire night and observed that he had a single beer can in his hand the entire night.
But you testified that you weren't worried about Charlie driving home. However, wouldn't you agree that even in a small amount of alcohol can impair someone's motor skills, as demonstrated by Charlie's poor performance on the field sobriety test?
That is possible.
So on the night in question, did you see Charlie drink anything other than beer? Could he have consumed alcohol at another time or place without your knowledge?
Objection, speculation.
Objections sustained. I'll allow it.
Oh yeah, I'll just move on to my next question. So, Andy, are you aware that Texas law prohibits any amount of alcohol consumption by someone under the age of 21 while operating a motor vehicle?
Yes, I am.
Wouldn't your testimony about Charlie drinking contradict his denial of consuming alcohol that night?
I am unaware of how much he drank or if he even did drink, so I really don't think I can answer that question.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
We, the jury, have come to the conclusion that there was an insufficient amount of evidence and we cannot conclude whether or not Charlie is guilty or not guilty of drinking while under the influence.
With the jury's verdict of not guilty and the lack of evidence, I hereby dismiss the charges against Charlie Mathers.